Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Tensions are escalating between the United States and Europe after President Trump threatened to impose tariffs on 8 European allies that oppose his push to take over Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark. On Sunday, Trump sent a text message to Norway's prime minister, writing, quote, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace," Trump wrote. He went on, quote, "The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland," unquote. In a post overnight, Trump also criticized Britain for giving the Chagos Islands back to Mauritius after nearly 6 decades of British rule. Over the weekend, thousands took part in protests in Greenland and Denmark. European leaders denounced Trump's threats and are weighing cutting off U.S. companies to the European Union market, a move known as the EU's trade bazooka. UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper spoke Monday.
As the Prime Minister said this morning, the future of Greenland is for the Greenlanders and for the Danes alone. Greenland is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and those principles around sovereignty are crucial. It's also why we have made very clear that the use of tariffs and threats against allies in this way is completely wrong and counterproductive.
President Trump's heading to the World Economic Forum in Davos. The Washington Post reports the elite gathering's been turned into an emergency diplomatic summit this year due to Trump's threats to take over Greenland. The Pentagon's placed 1,500 soldiers from the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska on standby to possibly be deployed to Minnesota, just days after President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act to quell protests over ICE's immigration crackdown. This comes as the Trump administration says it's opened criminal investigations into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, both of whom have sharply criticized ICE's tactics. In a statement, Governor Walz said, quote, "Weaponizing the justice system and threatening political opponents is a dangerous authoritarian tactic," unquote. On Friday, a federal judge ordered ICE agents to stop arresting or pepper spraying peaceful protesters in Minneapolis. On Sunday, demonstrators disrupted services at a church in St. Paul to protest one of the church's pastors, David Easterwood, who's reportedly a top ICE official in the Twin Cities. The Department of Justice is now threatening to investigate the protesters. In another development, the Trump administration is being accused of denying legal counsel to many arrested during the immigration sweeps. Multiple attorneys have told ABC they've been prevented from seeing clients held at the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, ICE agents continue to carry out raids. In St. Paul, armed, masked agents battered down the door of a home and, without a warrant, arrested a man who was let out of his home in his underwear in sub-freezing weather. It turned out that the man, Chong-Lee Scott Tao, is a naturalized U.S. citizen born in Laos. He was later released and spoke to reporters.
And then suddenly there's a guns pointed at us. I thought, whoa. And then they goes, "You come out here." I go, okay. And then I came up there with my hand up, and then they said put my hand on my back, so I did, and then suddenly they just handcuffed me.
We'll go to the streets of Minnesota after headlines, and we'll speak with constitutional lawyer Michelle Goodwin. President Trump's openly called for regime change in Iran. In an interview with Politico, Trump said, "It's time to look for new leadership in Iran," unquote. This comes as an internet blackout continues in Iran, where where security forces have largely crushed nationwide protests. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency says it's verified the deaths of over 3,900 protesters, but the group says the death toll could be far higher. At least 180 security forces have also been killed. The Iranian government has blamed some of the unrest on armed agitators. Israeli forces have begun demolishing the headquarters of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in occupied East Jerusalem. In a statement, the UN agency said, quote, "This is an unprecedented attack not only against UNRWA and its premises, it constitutes a serious violation of international law and the privileges and immunities of the United Nations," unquote. UNRWA was formed in 1949 to provide aid to Palestinians displaced during the Nakba. President Trump's invited Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to join his so-called Board of Peace. Trump floated the idea of the board to oversee a ceasefire in Gaza, but it now appears Trump is envisioning a body that could rival the United Nations. Over the weekend, French President Emmanuel Macron rejected Trump's offer to join the board, warning the new board could undermine the UN. Hungary's far-right Prime Minister Viktor Orban has accepted an invitation to join the board. Trump will serve as the board's chair and have veto power over the board's decisions. Initial appointees on the board include Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Trump envoy, Steve Witkoff, and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. In addition, Trump's asking countries to pay $1 billion for a permanent spot on the so-called Board of Peace. The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk visited Sudan for the first time since fighting erupted in April 2023 between the UAE-backed Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese military. Sudan's dealing with the world's largest displacement crisis. An estimated 13.6 million people are displaced by the ongoing war. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, over 30 million people out of Sudan's population of nearly 47 million are in need of humanitarian assistance. This is Volker Turk.
A chronicle of cruelty is unfolding before our very eyes, and we must not look away. This needs to shock our collective conscience. All those who have any influence, including regional actors, and notably those who supply the arms and benefit economically from this war, need to act urgently to put an end to it.
In Uganda, 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni has been re-elected to a seventh term. Election observers and rights groups criticized the result, claiming the campaign was marred by a heavy crackdown on the opposition and an internet blackout. The main opposition candidate, Bobi Wine, spoke to the BBC from hiding and said he will not contest the results. Wine told the BBC, quote, "The judiciary in Uganda is captured, and we encourage Ugandans to use any legal means to fight back and protect their democracy," he said. Chile has declared a state of catastrophe as wildfires have killed at least 19 people. Parts of central and southern Chile were under extreme heat warnings, with temperatures set to reach 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Guatemala's declared a state of emergency after 10 police officers have been killed in a wave of coordinated attacks. The violence started over the weekend when prisoners held dozens of guards hostage at 3 prisons, demanding privileges for gang members and leaders. Guatemalan President Bernardo Arevallo's state of emergency allows authorities to limit demonstrations and enables the police to arrest anyone suspected of being a gang member without an arrest warrant. Hundreds protested in Davos, Switzerland, ahead of President Trump's visit to the World Economic Forum, an annual gathering of global business elites. It comes as Oxfam released a report Monday warning that the collective wealth of billionaires hit a record $18.3 trillion and that the total number of billionaires surpassed 3,000 for the first time in history last year. Oxfam also reports highly unequal countries are 7 times more likely to experience the erosion of the rule of law and the undermining of elections. This is Oxfam's Director General, Amitabh Behar.
But the real story is also about how these billionaires are not content enough with being super rich. Now they're buying political power. So they're buying elections, they're buying media houses, and what you're eventually seeing is rise of oligarchies. So these few billionaires control politics, policies, and narratives.
The Justice Department's considering weakening gun laws in an attempt to appeal to Second Amendment supporters. According to the Washington Post, the DOJ is looking to ease rules on private gun sales, loosen requirements for shipping firearms, alter what types of guns can be imported, and even make federal gun licensing fees refundable. Officials are also looking to have applicants list their biological sex at birth on forms required to purchase guns. DOJ officials are reportedly seeking to announce the new rules at the National Shooting Sports Foundation Gun Trade Show in Las Vegas on Wednesday. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is scheduled to speak at the trade show. 3 top Catholic cardinals in the United States have issued an unusual statement denouncing U.S. foreign policy, saying the country's, quote, moral role in confronting evil around the world is in question. The cardinals cited the U.S. attack on Venezuela, Trump's threats against Greenland, and Russia's war in Ukraine. The cardinals wrote, quote, in 2026, the United States has entered into the most profound and searing debate about the moral foundation for America's actions in the world since the end of the Cold War, unquote. In other religious news, an Episcopal bishop in New Hampshire has urged fellow clergy to finalize their wills and prepare for what he called a new era of martyrdom, unquote. Bishop Rob Hirschfeld made the comments during a vigil honoring Renee Good, shot to death by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. The bishop said, quote, now is no longer the time for statements, but for us with our bodies to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable, unquote. On Monday, the Reverend Al Sharpton held a Martin Luther King Day rally in Harlem. He denounced the ICE killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis.
If she cursed him out, does that give them the right to shoot her? And they're now talking about sending in National Guard, sending in more ICE agents, sending 1,500. We are in a state that Dr. King would have been fighting against this country going this far.
Reverend Sharpton also criticized Trump for canceling free admission at national parks on MLK Day yesterday and on Juneteenth. Instead, park entrance fees are now waived on June 14th, President Trump's birthday. And 1 year ago today, President Trump returned to office. A coalition of activist groups, including the Women's March, are calling for a nationwide walkout from schools, jobs, and places of commerce today. It's called the Free America Walkout. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.